It's easy to get distracted. But if you know what to look for, you can dramatically improve your focus, confidence, and effectiveness in a conversation, argument, or debate. These are 6 red herrings to watch out for. So a red herring is a smelly old fish that's dragged across the ground to distract the hounds. In a conversation, a red herring is a distraction from the main topic. It's irrelevant. And these distractions are not always intentional, but sometimes they are. Either way, it's good to learn how to recognize them and how to respond to them. Red herring number 1, alternative explanations. An alternative explanation is not in and of itself a refutation. Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code might be a fun exercise of imagination, but it doesn't address any of the historical arguments for the divinity of Jesus. Similarly, aliens might be a fun explanation of the origin of human life, but it doesn't address the evidence for theism, including cosmology and teleology. And they may try to convince you that their alternative explanation is at least possible and should therefore be taken seriously. Every person should be taken seriously, but not every belief. It's important to distinguish between what's possible and what's reasonable, and express that you are exclusively interested in what's reasonable. Remember that an alternative explanation bears the burden of proof. It is not a proof in and of itself. Red herring number 2, the genetic fallacy. The genetic fallacy tries to invalidate a belief by explaining the origin of that belief. But the problem with that is that the origin of a belief has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of a proposition. Beliefs stand or fall on their own merit, wholly apart from whoever holds them. It doesn't matter why you believe something. What matters is whether or not that belief is actually true. And if they try to claim that your beliefs are formed by your bias, remind them that they're in the same boat. And this has more to do with personal psychology than truth itself. Our own psychology has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of a claim. Red herring number 3, pragmatism. See, pragmatism is more concerned with what works than what's true. A pragmatist might object or advocate a particular religion or worldview based on its usefulness. And this is often expressed in the view that belief in Christianity or in God is a crutch or a useful fiction. This is also concerned with personal psychology, as well as the role that religion plays in culture or sociology. But a sociological critique of a worldview says nothing about the truth or falsity of a worldview. Another problem with pragmatism is the inability to define what it means by useful. Useful for what, exactly? See, something can only be useful relative to a defined purpose. A hammer is a great tool for pounding nails because it was designed to do so. But a hammer isn't very useful for cooking eggs. Its usefulness is relative to its purpose. But what is the purpose of mankind, of life, of the whole universe? Most pragmatists will claim something along the lines of survival or happiness to be the universal purpose. But why think this? I know it's preferable, but what reason do we have for it, beyond our own bias? What makes those ideas objectively true, meaning above and beyond personal or corporate preference, thought, or opinion? What's more is that if the pragmatist claims that any of these ideas are objectively true or inherently valuable, they have just admitted the bankruptcy of pragmatism by appealing to objective truth, which takes precedence over usefulness. Simply put, the usefulness of a belief is irrelevant to the truth or falsity of the belief. Red herring number 4, ad hominem. Ad hominem is a Latin expression meaning to the man. An ad hominem is an attempt to invalidate a claim by attacking the character, judgment, or trustworthiness of the person holding it. And this is not always malicious or intentional. Even when it is, it should be pretty obvious why this is a red herring. The character of a person has no direct bearing on the truth or falsity of their claims. And when you're personally attacked, stay the course and resist the temptation to fire back. Don't defend yourself, defend your arguments. And the better your defense, the less defensive you'll be. Attacks on the Bible, The two most common attacks on the Bible are accusations of immorality and claims of contradiction. When it comes to claims of immorality, a common apologetics response is the axiological argument for God's existence. And while this response is sometimes appropriate, it usually derails the conversation even farther. It's usually best to stay on track and continue the conversation at hand, unless the main point of the discussion is biblical ethics. Try to establish the focus on the truth claims of Christianity, rather than debating biblical inerrancy. Now, by no means should you ignore the objection. On the contrary, take note of the issue by writing it down. Scrap piece of paper, your phone, whatever, and follow up with them when you've had more time to prepare and can focus on that particular objection. Now, when it comes to claims of contradiction, explain that most every apparent contradiction can be resolved when closely examining the text. It might be helpful to memorize an example that you can offer to them. Here's one that Dr. Craig espoused in his Defenders class. A man received a phone call from the hospital, and they explained that his wife had been struck by a vehicle and she was now in an ambulance being rushed to the hospital. She was in critical condition, but she's still alive. And then on his way to the hospital, he receives a phone call from his brother-in-law, who tells him that she was involved in a car accident and died instantly. So how do we resolve the apparent contradiction? What's incredible is this is actually a true story. She was struck by a vehicle and was rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. But on the way to the hospital, the ambulance was involved in a car crash and she died instantly. This is a perfect example of an apparent contradiction that can be easily resolved when examining the evidence. Bible interpretation is serious business. It's very often complicated and nuanced. Historians, theologians, and philosophers can spend their entire lives dedicated to the practice of biblical interpretation. The Bible is thousands of years old and from a culture that's very different than ours. And most people that object to the Bible are doing so on the basis of a quick Google search. And if they take issue with the complexity of Scripture, then they're just attacking a straw man. See, on the one hand, they want a version of religion that's so simple it could be imagined by a 5-year-old, making it very easy to criticize. But then on the other hand, when you tell them it's more nuanced than that, they say it's way too complicated, and God and religion shouldn't be complicated. But we're talking about worldview here. It's literally the loftiest topic possible. Now, with all that said, it is good to become familiar with the more prevalent passages in Scripture which seem to cause difficulty. But when possible, do it on your own time and follow up with them. Red herring number 6, church behavior and history. This is an ad hominem. The behavior or actions of people has nothing to do with the truth or falsity of a worldview. In fact, Christianity itself teaches that all people are sinful and fall short of the glory of God. So it should be no surprise to see Christians behaving badly. Bad behavior, especially when paired with the axiological argument, is evidence in favor of Christianity, not against it. Now, there is something to be said about genuine Christian faith and the fruit it produces. Sanctification, the process in which we become more and more conformed to the heart and mind of Christ, is an experience that's relative to the individual. It isn't fair to compare two people with different upbringings, temperament, psychology, social status, whatever, because God deals with each of us individually. You can only compare an individual to themselves before and after they came to Christ. And even then, you won't have access to their intentions or the ways that they're affected by internal and external influences. Only God knows perfectly where a person is at in terms of sanctification. Now, even though church history and behavior is a red herring, it can be a wonderful opportunity to share the gospel and how it relates to this objection. In fact, when all things are considered, anything that isn't the gospel is a distraction.